I moved back into my childhood home out of desperation, not choice. After my divorce and the overwhelming medical bills from my son Ethan's asthma attacks, I had no option left. It's only temporary, I told myself, watching my parents glare at every box I brought inside like it was infected. My mother had always been cold, the type who ironed pillowcases but wrinkled your self-worth. My father barely spoke unless he was correcting something. My sister Laura, 3 years younger, lived nearby, and unlike me, she was still the princess of the family. Perfect job, perfect hair, no kids, no mess. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video. Ethan was nervous, clutching his backpack like a shield. "Will Grandma be nice this time?" he whispered as we unpacked. I gave him the softest smile I could fake. Just stay quiet and stay out of her way. For the first few weeks, things were tense but manageable. Ethan kept to himself, drawing spaceships and watching the sky. He always stayed polite. "Thank you. Excuse me. Good night." But that wasn't enough to soften my mother. She hated the sound of a child. Any child. One Sunday afternoon, Laura came over in a flowing ivory dress for a family cookout. She twirled in the yard like she was on some bridal runway, even though it was just burgers and cheap lemonade. My parents beamed as if she were royalty gracing them with her presence. Ethan stood a few feet away, holding a paper plate with chips. A gust of wind blew Laura's dress sideways, and Ethan instinctively reached out to stop it from flying into the fire pit. Just the edge. Just a reflex. No harm. But Laura shrieked like he'd punched her. "Don't touch me!" she bellowed, drawing every eye in the yard. My mother stormed over like a soldier on a mission. "How dare you put your filthy hands on her!" She spat, then grabbed Ethan, my little boy, by the arm and dragged him across the grass like a sack of trash. His paper plate dropped, his foot caught, he hit the ground. "Stop!" I screamed, running toward them. But before I could reach, she shoved him at my feet. My father stood up from his chair, clapping mockingly. "That's how you teach trash respect," he said, shaking his head like it was some moral victory. I dropped to my knees, cradling Ethan as he cried silently, trying not to sob loud enough for them to call it drama. "You are never to touch her again?" my mom barked, still glaring down at him. "Touch her?" I snapped, my voice trembling. "He saved her dress from burning." "Don't get hysterical," my father muttered. "Maybe he'll learn next time." Laura just stood there, not a scratch on her, not a wrinkle on that stupid dress, watching us like we were disgusting insects she'd stepped on by accident. That night, I held Ethan close as he asked, "Mom, am I bad?" I looked him in the eyes, my voice shaking with fury I had no place to put. "No, baby, but they are." And that's when something broke in me. They had crossed the final line. I wasn't just going to leave, I was going to leave them with nothing. The next morning, Ethan refused to eat. He just sat on the edge of the guest bed, knees pulled to his chest, staring at the floor like it held answers to questions he was too young to ask. His tiny fingers kept tracing the red mark on his arm where Mom had gripped him. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't mean to ruin everything." That was it for me. I looked around that house, the one where I'd grown up being ignored, insulted, compared, discarded, and suddenly it all clicked. They hadn't changed, and I had spent years hoping that if I just kept giving them chances, they'd magically become parents. They never would, but I wasn't a helpless daughter anymore. I was a mother. I left the house that afternoon and drove straight to the library, where I spent 5 hours researching every financial, legal, and social lever I could pull. Then I started documenting everything, every insult, every bruise, every passive-aggressive jab, quietly, meticulously. I waited 3 days, long enough for them to think I had moved on, long enough for my sister Laura to strut in again with another overpriced outfit, batting her lashes like she was royalty at a garden party. That day, I sat with my mother in the kitchen while she bragged about how Laura had been offered a job at a fancy PR firm in LA. "She's flying out for interviews next month," Mom said, sipping her coffee. "We'll miss her terribly." I smiled politely. "I didn't know she had a passport." Has she ever even flown domestic? My mom paused. Excuse me? I leaned forward, voice steady. She's listed me as her co-signer for the last 4 credit cards she maxed out, including one for a spa weekend in Napa. And I've got the statements. Mom's face froze, porcelain mug halfway to her lips. What? What are you talking about? She's been using my name, my credit, my social, for years. It was a lie, but a smart one. I knew Laura had taken out loans in college that my parents secretly paid off. She'd buried herself in vanity expenses. Her trail was sloppy. A few phone calls, a few documents, and I made it look like a federal offense. Mom started to speak, but I held up my phone. I've already submitted the fraud alert paperwork, and since I'm not pressing charges yet, I figured I'd let her know in person. That afternoon, Laura showed up as usual, in heels too high and empathy too low. I met her at the door with a file in hand. "What is this?" she scoffed. "Proof," I said flatly, "that your life is built on my back." She flipped through the forged papers, fake enough to scare, real enough to convince. Her face turned the color of wet paper. "You're bluffing," she hissed. "Try me." Dad overheard us from the living room and marched in. "You think you're better than her?" he snapped. "You're a single mother living in our basement." I turned toward him slowly. "And yet I'm the only one with a clean record, Dad. That job Laura's chasing, the one that checks background thoroughly, one call from me and she'll be blacklisted before the second interview." For the first time in my life, my father was silent, but it wasn't enough. So I made dinner that night. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, the whole nostalgic spread. I played my part, the quiet daughter, grateful to be home, eager to please. While they ate, I waited until just the right moment, then handed them each a neatly folded letter. "What's this?" Dad asked, mouth full. "My departure notice," I said, "and a summary of all the damages Ethan and I have suffered under your roof. Financial, emotional, and physical." "You wouldn't," Mom began. "I already did," I said. "I've filed for a restraining order. You'll be served in 2 days." Laura choked on her wine. "Think of it as a gift," I added, rising. "Now you have no trash in your house. Just like you always wanted." I walked out of that house holding Ethan's hand, my spine straighter than it had ever been. But the real finale? That was coming, because I hadn't just exposed them legally. I was going to humiliate them publicly, the same way they humiliated my son. 2 months passed before the silence finally cracked. I'd moved into a tiny duplex on the edge of town, a place with peeling paint and a yard small enough for Ethan to plant a tomato vine. The air smelled of cut grass and freedom. He laughed again there, softly at first, then louder each day. I thought the story was over. Then the letter came. It was from a reporter with the County Herald. "Ms. Reed, we've received several anonymous tips concerning potential child mistreatment and elder misconduct at your parents' residence. Would you be willing to speak on background?" I hadn't told anyone what happened that day in the yard, but someone, maybe a neighbor, maybe one of my father's drinking buddies with a conscience, had seen enough. I met the journalist in a coffee shop and showed her everything I had documented. Photos of Ethan's bruised arm, the recordings of my mother yelling, the timestamps, the diary entries. She didn't promise revenge, she promised accuracy. That was better. The article dropped on a Sunday morning. Front page. Family's perfect image shattered by allegations of child abuse and financial fraud. It didn't name Ethan, it called him a minor relative, but everyone in town knew who lived behind that perfect white fence. Within hours, the story spread, teachers whispered, church friends stopped attending their luncheons. My parents' charity board suspended my mother, pending investigation. My father's business partners pulled out of a joint project. Laura deleted every social media profile she owned. They called me the next evening. Mom's voice shook, not from guilt, but from fear. "You destroyed us." "No," I said quietly. "You did." She tried again. "Do you know what people are saying?" "I know exactly what they're saying. They're finally seeing you." She hung up. Weeks later, the restraining order hearing came. They showed up with a lawyer in matching suits, trying to look composed. I wore a plain blouse and held Ethan's hand. The judge listened to the audio of my mother yelling, "That's how you teach trash respect." You could feel the air shift. My parents didn't look at me again after that recording ended. The order was granted. They couldn't come within 200 yards of us. After court, I took Ethan for ice cream. He dipped his spoon and grinned. "Are we safe now?" "Yeah," I said. "We're safe." But safety wasn't enough. I wanted peace, the kind that doesn't rely on fear. So instead of feeding the gossip cycle, I turned the chaos into something useful. I wrote. Every night after Ethan fell asleep, I poured everything into a blog called Breaking the Pattern. I changed names, hid locations, and told our story as a cautionary tale about recognizing abuse when it wears polite smiles. The blog exploded. Messages poured in from people who said, "This is my mother. This is my family." I thought I was alone. By fall, I was invited to speak at a regional parenting conference about healing after generational cruelty. I almost said no, terrified of standing on a stage. But Ethan asked if he could come. "I want to hear you tell the truth out loud," he said. So I did. When I stepped up to the podium, my hands shook, but my voice didn't. I spoke about the day in the yard, about the silence that followed, about the choice between becoming bitter or becoming free. The crowd was quiet the whole time. When I finished, people stood. Some cried, and in the front row, Ethan clapped the loudest. A week later, I got an email from an old neighbor. "Your parents sold the house. They're leaving town." I stared at the screen for a long time, not with triumph, just stillness. Because revenge had already happened, quietly, piece by piece. It wasn't the article or the court order or the ruined reputations. It was that they finally had to live in the world they created, one without admiration, without control, without us. 1 year later, on the anniversary of the cookout, Ethan and I returned to the park behind our new home. He'd built a kite from colored paper and string. The wind tugged it upward until it soared against the afternoon sky. He laughed so hard he almost fell over. I lay back on the grass and watched that small shape climb higher and higher. For the first time, I realized that revenge wasn't the ending, it was the bridge. The real ending was freedom. And as Ethan shouted, "Mom, look, it's flying!" I whispered back, "So are we." Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video.